Well, I'm here.
Hi, everyone.
I should say, hey, Alyssa, not just ignore you when you say that.
Hi, Randy.
Hello.
Alyssa, I'm so jealous of your kitties. They're all snuggling back there.
That is their spot. They are always there sleeping together.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, George.
So I have to confess, I'm feeling a little foggy. I had kind of a rough night and was in the doctor's this morning, but I'm here and I'm fine. I just am a little tired and might be even less effective than I normally am.
Even. Now, Sean said he might be coming in late. Is that right? Or leaving early or something. I thought he said he might run late on his last meeting before 3 too. So he could be in late.
While we wait for him, Randy, we might find cause to keep talking about CARES after 3:30, or we might be able to finish that conversation. I'm not motivated to wait until 4 to take up the other item if we end up being done with CARES before 4.
Yeah, I'm not either. I'd like to be done too whenever we can reasonably. The main thing is the CARES funding is to get through that discussion, and
the other item should be pretty quick.
but I'm willing to stay as long as it takes to deal with both items.
I guess I can get some of this stuff out of the way.
And there's Sean. So I think the gang's all here.
Great. Just in time for me to find the right agenda. So yes, it is June 4th. It's 3:02. This is a special meeting for us to discuss 2 topics. One is to give an update to the board on CARES funding and receive any guidance that they have the pleasure to give, and or we, and at 4 o'clock or potentially earlier, consideration of approval of resolution number 21-50. First thing on the agenda, as for every agenda, is public comment. If you are here and wish to make a public comment, you can click participants, click raise hand. I'd love to hear you out.
And while we're waiting, I just wanted to remind everyone that I didn't actually say I was available this afternoon. I said I was available today before 9:30. So I'm only going to, and the state treasurer and other people are for the Colorado Secure Savings Program Board are literally doing nothing, waiting for me right now. So I can only be here for a half hour right now.
Okay.
Understood. Well, let's be quick. I'll go ahead and close public comment, and Alyssa, we'll hand it over to you to do a quick update on CARES.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Share my screen.
And while she's getting the screen, let me say that I've heard from Dave Young a couple of times how valuable your work has been down there with him, Sean. And I just thought I'd share that in a place like this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we've been working since 9:30 this morning.
You've been working a lot longer than that, but that's just today. Yeah.
All right, can everyone see that? Great. All right, so CARES budget update. This is as of June 4th, today. So just as a reminder, here are the 2 buckets of CARES dollars we have received. Our first round was based on our population size, so that's how that amount was allocated to us. That second amount, that $834,000, that was a grant that I wrote to the state to secure some of their reserve funds.
I think
So
you need
we
to.
Alyssa, yeah, I think Brandy was just going to point out, we only see the title. We don't see the second page.
You need to scroll down a slide.
Weird. My screen is moving. That's very strange. How about now?
Yes, up, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. That's really weird. I have split screens, so it must be doing some weird things. So again, that first round, CARES 1 is just the amount that we received based on our population. That second amount, that $834,000, is a grant that was.
Sorry, Alyssa, we lost you again.
Yeah.
We're looking at a letter of support for the.
Okay.
There we go.
My face is going to be turned then. I apologize. It doesn't like it on my left monitor. Okay, so totaling 1.6, almost $1.67 million of CARES dollars. I just wanted to quickly provide the budgets that were provided to the state for each round of CARES dollars that we received. We did as best as we could to stay as close to these, but as you all know, things were changing quite rapidly, as were the needs. And so a little bit was shifted. And feel free to stop me if you have questions on these slides. Here is the total amount of what we have spent, totaling $1.42 million. As you can see at the top, Idaho Springs, that $50,000, that is from the allocation that they received. That funding came directly from the state, so it was taken from our total amount, but the state actually gave them those dollars. Empire received $10,000, and because that amount was less, they actually submitted their reimbursement directly to us. So they received $7,762 back. So there was about $3,000 left that went back into the general pot. Does anyone have any questions about these line items? I did put a little note under salary and wages just to with the positions that CARES funded in case you had questions about that. As you can see, the individual support grant went directly to the Grand Foundation, and anytime the money went directly to an organization, I noted who it went to, except for the lodge. This one went to Idaho Springs.
I have one general question, and we don't have to answer it right now, but my assumption is at some point we're going to go back and do some sort of an after action analysis and determine where we hit the mark and where we maybe didn't. So I think that would be really important to do before we all forget about this.
Sure. Yeah. We can definitely make sure that happens. So I just wanted to quickly remind you what some of the CARES limitations are. I tried to be brief with this. As you all know, the FAQ from the Treasury is quite long. There are a lot of rules around how CARES dollars can be spent. And so I tried to be as brief as possible. So the necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19. So there has to be a very, very clear direct link to COVID, which has limited us in some ways. The item could not have been accounted for in the budget most recently approved as of March 27th, 2020. This one didn't really limit us in many ways. And then this one, so any item that is incurred between March 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2021 is, as long as it meets all the other eligibility requirements, is eligible. So we cannot be paying for things that take place after December 31st, 2021. And then no durable goods. So we can't purchase like the VMS boards or a truck to pull the trailer or anything like that. We can rent those items, but we cannot purchase them. And then I just wanted to provide you a list of what some of our unfunded ideas are right now. There has been a staff team meeting together weekly to review ideas as well as approve them. And so here are some of the ideas that are on that list that have not been approved, but have been at the table of conversation. So individual support grant, we gave this grant $61,000 of CARES dollars, as well as $125,000 from a grant through the Mile High United Way. This was to support people that were potentially going to lose their house or incur significant debt due to being impacted by COVID-19. Of that total amount, we have about $25,000 left. This is the fund that the Grand Foundation is administering. And so something that was on the table was, if needed, giving an additional $50,000 or whatever number we feel is most appropriate. I will say that the applications have slowed down. We are still getting them, but they have slowed down significantly. The next item on this list is the recovery coordinator position, as well as the consumer protection specialist position.
Real quick, Alyssa, do we know of roughly how much monthly we're spending on that now? That's the 25,000 that's remaining.
That's a good question. I would say roughly it's about $2,000 to $3,000 a month.
So it looks
maybe
like
a little bit. You know what? Actually, that's a week. I'm sorry. It might be a little bit more. Sorry. I saw George's face, and it's definitely a week. Basically what happens is the Grand Foundation reviews the applications and sends myself and a few other team members a list of individuals that are in need, and then we either approve or deny them. Each individual is usually receiving about $2,000.
Do we do any sort of underwriting to basically make sure that whoever's receiving that is making good faith efforts to pull themselves up out of their situation rather than just accepting the money and not doing something like that?
At this point, no. The quantity of applications that we were receiving, it was very frequent, and so there was nothing put in place to do that.
Okay.
I will say that there have only been, I want to say anecdotally, 2 or 3 individuals who have reapplied. And so there haven't been a lot of people that have been asking for additional funds. And we do have the women from the Resource Center. We have one of the women on the committee who's reviewing those applications to ensure that everyone is taking advantage of the benefits that are available and not misusing the funds. So the recovery coordinator position and the consumer protection specialist position, those positions were fully funded by CARES in 2020. Those positions were written into the budget for 2021. There has not been a solid decision on whether those positions will be paid for by CARES now that CARES has been extended through 2021. That is an option on the table. And so I just wanted to present that if that's something that we are interested in doing. And the total amount that HR has given us is $145,187. The next item on the list is labor market incentives. We know that there have been a lot of challenges with hiring right now. We've been in discussions pretty significantly with the Jefferson Center Workforce and Development Board and have some interesting ideas that we could potentially pilot here in the county. From the best of our knowledge, we would be the only county piloting these types of innovative programs. And so We have a next steps conversation next week to talk through what those ideas might look like and if businesses are interested in participating. And so potentially putting some funding towards that. The next item on this is a COVID financial management firm. We are looking at hiring a firm to manage to manage all of the COVID funding that we've received and make sure that we are prepared for being audited. So this would include CARES dollars, FEMA dollars, so managing that reimbursement process, as well as potentially working with us on ARPA dollars as well. The next one is job fair number 2 promotion. We held a very successful job fair last week. We put about $700 into promoting it. We are doing another job fair, and so potentially spending some more dollars to promote that job fair. And then any additional public health staffing needs that we have. As you all know, things have been happening fairly rapidly. Things have slowed down, which has been good, but we just wanted to leave this as a line item in here just in case something pops up and public health needs some additional support. And then the last thing on this list is a behavioral health navigator. This is a position that was suggested by the Omni Institute, who did our behavioral health assessment. This would be a position that obviously lasts beyond 2021, but we could potentially put some funding in now through CARES to fund it at least through the end of 2021, and then talk about what a more long-term solution is. And I don't have dollars next to any of the last few that I mentioned, just because I don't have an exact number. I have ballpark ideas, but nothing exact.
And just, I put some thought into how in 15 minutes we can, get where we need to get. One approach could be that this is a time where if the board doesn't like any of these ideas, they could say, no, we're not doing that one. Or if the board has an idea that they want us to pursue, they could say, throw this on there, or we. But I'm not trying to limit you all. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll weigh in real quick since I'm going to be the first one to leave this meeting. I think the 145,000 for the recovery coordinator, I mean, I assume that those numbers are vetted and that that's the right number. I think that one, even if those particular roles aren't going to be 100% necessary in November and December, I'm confident that the people that we have in place are going to be able to do something pretty beneficial and helpful for the community. So I think that one is pretty good. There's a few other ideas that I've had in mind. One of them is related to Grand County. They have a gentleman there, gosh, I wish I could remember his name. His job title, I believe, is Enterprise Facilitator, and he is essentially a new job and new company formation coach. He works with this guy named Ernesto Ciroli in California. And I think I like the idea of essentially doing something to address the root problem. I'm not a huge fan in handing out support right now because just looking at it kind of holistically, there are many decently paying jobs that are wanting, and for a variety of reasons, those jobs aren't going filled. And so to pour more money toward that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. The other one is related to just basic financial knowledge. There's a company called Neighborhood Trust out of New York City that essentially provides financial coaching and essentially serves as a trusted source for anybody, because the people who generally find themselves immediately in financial trouble when something like this happens, oftentimes there is some element of a lack of financial literacy or knowledge that's preventing them from being in a more stable position in the first place. And if we can do something to attack the root problem rather than the more immediate approaches, those are things that I think are pretty interesting. And then the last thing I'll say is I'm pretty skeptical of funding jobs that we don't have a solution for after December 31st. So if we're going to do something like this navigator, I would be open to it, but I would want to have a plan to basically sunset that thing on January 1st if we don't have any funding, rather than creating a program with long-term funding needs and basically having the thing take on a life of its own and us have to unfund something else or start tapping into other revenue sources. So those are my initial thoughts. And thanks, Alyssa and George, for sourcing these ideas in the first place. And feel free to, Alyssa, reach out to me. I probably will always have ideas about things like this.
Sean, I just wanted to really quick touch on the behavioral navigator point that you made. I 100% agree with you. One of the things that we have been talking about a little bit is how does the ARPA dollars that we're receiving play into this? And what is the long-term solution, or solution is definitely not the word I'm looking for, but what does the long-term plan for behavioral health needs in our community look like? And how does this position play into it? So I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yeah, I think that the behavioral health navigator is it's obviously got attention at the state level and everywhere, those needs. And it may be part of, an evolving strategy for dealing with behavioral health in our community, which begs two questions. How do we really think about it in a sustainable sense? And number two, is it, in that behavioral health itself, is one of the impacts of COVID, yes, the expenses of dealing with it, but is the call for a behavioral health navigator because that's what we need to be doing to deal with behavioral health? And do we need to find a sustainable funding model for that position or that function? So there's two questions it begs right there. Is it a COVID item, number one? And if it is something that's important, then there may be other ways we need to be looking at it. If it's both, then maybe this is a window in the door, but I agree that we'd have to look for a sustainable funding method going forward after that date.
It looks like we lost Shawnee, maybe sitting on the attendees side. Maybe not. Randy, maybe a question for you. Sean mentioned that he would rather us steer clear of, as I understood it, continuing to fund the individual support grant. For me, it's something that I remain interested in doing as long as we see need. And I'm curious, therefore, if you are interested in breaking a tie that would result in direction on this, or would you rather leave it to staff?
If it's been beneficial for us to this point, I think, I understand the argument that there are jobs that are, not met, that are not filled. That said, it doesn't mean that every person that's out there is suitable or even able to land all of those jobs. There isn't necessarily a home for everybody, as an example. How to separate, which of those situations are COVID impacts is, we have to leave the people, I guess, that are filling the function. Personally, I believe that if our staff feels we have those individuals that still need that help and that it's justified by COVID and they're not just hanging out because they can get free money, then I would still support the line item.
And I'm so sorry, my laptop battery died and I just borrowed someone's cord. Could you, Randy, just give me a 15-second overview of what I missed?
Yeah, I said that with regard to the individual support grant, George said that he still favors it, and he asked what I thought. And I said, I'm okay with it still being there because not every person is suitable for every job that's offered out there, and there may be people who have those impacts for whom that could still be a reasonable function. How we sort that out among staff, how we qualify people to know that we're not just, paying for a vacation, is important. And what I basically said was, I'd like for us to be vigilant that we're using it for the right purposes, and I presume that we will be with our staff, and that I would support money left in that line item for that purpose, but with that caveat that we want to be careful because the knowledge that there are jobs out there. and make sure that we're dealing with people that truly have that need, that's connected to the stuff that's going on today.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. The key thing that you mentioned to me, Randy, is that we do a little bit more due diligence and underwriting just to make sure that, people aren't taking advantage of the opportunity, and that the people who are truly in need are the ones that we're addressing. And then the last thing I'll say about it is there's still $25,000 left, and we're spending $2,000 a week or whatever it is. We still have a few months before that runs out. So it's not something we need to decide right now. I think we have 6 months left to figure out what to do.
Yeah. So what I see is if we approve those two line items, sorry, George, if for example, we acknowledge the first two line items, there's about $43,000 left unspoken for. Is that correct, Alyssa?
Yep, roughly.
Yeah, and I just to clarify my comment, I'm not saying that I think we need to spend another $50,000. We put that in there as a placeholder in case we see need. And some events that we thought might happen have not, like another closure. And so, I would be surprised at this point if $50,000 ended up being spent on that. And my intent is to just kind of leave it to that group, which, full disclosure, I'm on. As I believe, and staff, correct me if you think, well, it'd be too embarrassing for you to tell me I'm wrong on this, but I think I operate in an egalitarian way on that group. So if we left it to them to say, we're not going to tell you, no, you can't spend any money on that, that might be reasonable.
Yeah, I tend to agree with George as well. I don't see us using that 50,000. It's definitely slowing down significantly. So I don't even 10,000, I don't see happening. There are definitely still people in need, but the people in need are not in need because of COVID. And we have very strict guidelines on what they have to show for proof of how there's the COVID need.
So does that mean that I'm hearing from what both George and Alyssa have said, that $50,000 number should be, if we're making our best estimates in every category, is that $50,000, should it remain at 50,000 as insurance in case there's a closure, or should we allocate funds as we truly anticipate need, which means should that 50,000 change, or should the balance of the funds go somewhere else? What's your take?
I think my opinion would be maybe lower it to 25 or even 20 as a buffer just in case, but I would feel comfortable going that low.
One thing I would note is in the highly unlikely event that we head that far in the direction that we head in, there's going to be more helicopter money almost for sure. So I don't think we need to even really plan for that. But I'm okay with leaving some marker down with the idea that we could revisit it in July or August and find a place to direct that money for the biggest impact for everyone here at Clear Creek.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me too. And that number 50,000 is, I think we came up with that like late February, where we were still on, who knew what the future held. So yeah, I agree that number can be lower. On the two staff positions that I believe, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we had, those are in our budget, as in being paid out of the general fund now. Does anybody have strong feelings about whether we should go ahead and convert that out of general fund and into CARES, knowing that would mean we can do less to help in the labor market? Maybe that means we don't get behavioral health navigation or other ideas come up. How are you all viewing that trade-off, and do you wish to issue direction on that topic?
Could you restate that really in a succinct way?
Yeah. So would you like, do you have a strong opinion that you would like to see CARES money and not the general fund pay for these two positions?
For sure. Yeah, because these are directly related to CARES. I don't see why we would ever want to spend general fund money when there's other dollars that have been provided for that. I think even furthermore, I think there's a possibility that those, I might hope that those roles morph into something else, and that'll be part of our budget discussion for 2022.
I think the fact that they are legitimate CARES expenditures is a strong reason to make sure that is a reason to use that. If things happen that cause, if there are other COVID related expenses that we need to deal with, and we agreed that we need to deal with them, we could use general fund expenditures at that time, but it seems like we should use the funds that we have available to us in a manner that we know we can without question. That's my general reaction to that. And it's not that some of the things you mentioned, George, that we might choose to spend this on down the road couldn't be funded anyway. But in either case, it comes out of the general fund. So to pay these two salaries out of the general fund rather than use these funds to do it implies that we do have to do these other things with these funds at this time, and that's a decision. And I mean, if there are things that need to be done, we can do them out of the general fund, or if it's because there's an increase in the pandemic again, then would likely be additional funds coming to help reimburse those. I mean, that's just my immediate reaction logically to it. I mean, the issue we're meeting here about is we've got $238,000 that we need to spend.
Yeah, and you know, I know we've talked about this off and on for the last year, and CARES money can do some things that we legally can't do with general fund dollars. And so how's this for a proposal? If this group wants to recommend spending more dollars on things not these two staff positions, then we can. Like if we have an idea that would replace using CARES on these positions, we would need approval from the board for that idea to work or to be authorized.
That's reasonable.
I actually have to rejoin my meeting. Is there anything related to this that you guys want me to weigh in on before I have to drop off?
I don't think so. I actually think we might be there.
I think so. I think, Sean, what I just heard George say was that, you know, the 145 is there. We can be using, we could use it to pay for this, but if we see another need and some of that money is still remaining, that we might choose to pay for something else and revert those salaries back into the general fund, because legally we can pay them out of the general fund as opposed to something else that we couldn't pay out of the general fund, but none of that would happen. It would come as a recommendation to us, the board, to approve. Is that what I heard, George?
Yes, thank you for getting that a little more clearly.
No, I just said it in a different, complicated way. It was.
I wanted to make one quick statement too, related to the next agenda item. I was very honored and proud to be part of the discussion where we listened carefully to the folks who had put together the renaming, and I was very happy to provide that recommendation. What you guys are about to talk about without my presence is a resolution that is a little different from that, and I think it has some very strong language in it. I think it is kind of like holding up a bunch of lightning rods, and I don't feel like it's my role as a commissioner to make statements like that as a board. I feel like it has some more information in there that's probably more personal, probably more appropriate to be sent from any one of the commissioners directly to whoever they want to send it to. So with all that said, I would just ask that my name not be signed to that. And you know, if we want to look at it and recraft it to something that I think is a little bit less potentially strongly worded in ways that can't necessarily be historically verified, I'd be open to it, but I'll just leave it at that. And I appreciate, Randy, all the energy you put into the work and doing the research and representing the county to the different nations and the outcome. And I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
And I know you need to go now, so I won't take any of your time to explain any of it. And it's recorded if you ever wanted to look. And it's and I understand what you're saying. There are some reasons, and I'll talk about them after you're gone, and
Okay.
figure out what we
Everybody.
do.
Okay, does everybody clearly understand what the outcomes of the CARES conversation?
Yeah, there was just one quick point that I wanted to make in the conversation about the salaries. If my position is paid 100% by CARES, I'm somewhat limited in what I'm able to do beyond COVID. So I just want to make sure that that is on the record, and then I say that out loud, and it's part of the consideration when we decide how we're going to fund the recovery coordinator position.
That's a really important point. And I think what it begs is it might mean that there needs to be some, careful and accurate accounting for how you spend your time so that we are able to use your, not insignificant talent to do the best things possible for the county. And if some of those things are fundable, they are, and some they aren't. So we just means we need to account for it well and only charge to CARES those things that are appropriately should be charged to CARES. And that's what I'm hearing. Do careful accounting.
Yes.
Keep a good timesheet.
It's a good point. Unfortunately, there's another process where we just sort of acknowledge that she's substantially dedicated to COVID and don't have to track her hours. And as long as that's true, she can
Right.
spend an hour or two here or there, or probably more than an hour or two, but I don't think it's very precisely stated.
I think we assume COVID unless she flags otherwise. If it's a significant amount of time on an important project, it's not COVID related. I'm sure Alyssa will flag that for us, and so that we're straight.
Yeah. One other thing that I just want to just make sure is clear, because this is how I'm interpreting it. It just occurred to me that I might be wrong. As other ideas come up, is it the understanding that staff can act on those ideas that are not on this list, as long as they don't affect the standing direction about those salaries and the cap on amount for individual support? And that's kind of a question for you, Randy.
Could you restate, please?
Yeah, so if new ideas that were not on that list show up or win, right? Can staff act on ideas that were not on this list, as long as it doesn't go against the standing direction that came out of this?
Well, I
Alyssa,
think
while Randy's thinking of that, you do have something on the screen, a letter that I don't think you want on the screen. Sorry, Randy.
Is it gone? I'm sorry. I'm trying to stop sharing my screen and it's being weird.
It's gone. You have not stopped sharing your screen. Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, the question is, as long as it does not go outside the direction of this board and we think of something new. If we think of something new we didn't talk about, then it feels like it's like automatically outside the direction. I guess personally, I'm pretty easygoing about this stuff. I just want to know that it's a good expenditure and that it's a legitimate CARES expenditure. Being able to know those things up front isn't very hard to do. We have the ability to communicate those. So rather than say, if we come up with some ideas, can we just go spend the money? Personally, I would like to be able to just know what's going on. But I've got I have the sense, I haven't looked over anybody's shoulder so far because I have a great deal of trust in all the work that you're doing. So I don't know how else to state it any less vaguely.
Yeah, and let me give you some examples of what's on my mind. Like, we've done things like decide to send postcards when there's an important message to go out that costs $3,000. I'll just be frank. I'd rather not have to fit it into the board's schedule to evaluate a decision like that. Mm-hmm. And so, like, we have right now the 143. We have about 175 that the board said yeah, like we want to reserve this money. So the remaining 50,000, if we come up with an idea up to that 50,000 that's not on this list, is there like a threshold at which you'd like us to bring it to you, or is there like how can we enable some nimbleness and still meet your expectations for involvement?
I'm kind of thinking about, you know, to start with, I think it's about 75,000 that's left over. If we reduce the 50,000 to 20,000, that's 175, 25 plus 38.
Split the difference.
30, yeah, whatever, 68,000, something like that. 5,000. That was a number.
Okay.
I mean, that was just a suggestion. It kind of had a lilt at the end of my, you know.
I mean, like this is all good. I don't, because I'm on, like, I have a sort of a staff role here. I really kind of want to just like take your direction. So I'm not going to quibble with you.
And actually I'm not thinking of it that way. I think you can wear both hats at once and I'm okay. And we can have a good conversation. All I'm suggesting that as a thought about how to do it. And I don't say it as a matter of trying to micromanage anyone. It's just a matter of we're asked to throw funds out and say yes. And I feel the same as you do, that I have a, you know, like a responsibility to know what's going on. So I should know no matter what. I mean, even if it wasn't so you couldn't spend it, it's like, you know, hey, what's going on over there, because I care about it.
I'd like to go back to that, one of the line items on that spreadsheet of COVID financial assistance. I can't remember exactly what it said, but those have been ongoing conversations because, as we have recognized, it's a lot of work to manage all the documentation for reimbursements and following those up. So in conversations in our budget meetings and with Brent, we are looking at a few different firms that will help us with that, so that we make sure that we get all of our reimbursements and all the paperwork is where it needs to go, because it's a pretty big burden on finance. So we don't know what that number will be. We've been throwing around up to 50,000, but we just don't know. So based on, we're hoping to find out in the next couple of weeks, figure that out. But once they get in and help us do stuff, it's going to be one of those things where, excuse me, we all kind of ongoingly assess what's needed. And then we may say we need you to spend this many hours or more than you thought. So if we can reserve 50K for that line item, that would absolutely get us where we need to go. We might not spend that much, but I'd really want to make sure that we have that in there to cover that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would you agree? I guess.
Yeah.
This is a board meeting. I don't know what we have to do for it.
That's as much George's call, or even more so than mine, because he's so has been connected at the hip to this for so long. What I'm suggesting is if there are extra lines added to the bottom of this that we hadn't thought of, and they're really, really significant, it'd be nice to know, just to be nice to be informed. That's what I'm asking. And I've got a fiduciary responsibility to the, you know, just like we all do to the people that we serve, to just kind of pay attention to what's going on. So when you ask me if I want to know how the money's being spent and I'm the county commissioner, I have to say, of course I do. There is no other answer I can give. So, but, you know, I mean, the work that's done so far is good. I agree with actually the line items that are on there right now are all legitimate line items, including the behavioral health navigator, even though we had that discussion about how, as long as it fits, and I think we can justify it, as long as we're working towards a sustainable funding source for that. And if you've got some more, I'm all ears. Additional line items we haven't discussed. And if they're minor line items, sub $5,000, and it's an obvious slam dunk decision, don't call me first. You know, just go ahead and do that.
We won't call you first in any context. We'll schedule a meeting.
That's fine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Hey, Suzanne, I have a quick thought about the financial management. Primary focus of that, I think, will be on getting the FEMA grant entries caught up and
Yep.
uploaded. And I think that, and I'll double check this, but I think that the source for that would be more likely to be come from the FEMA pot than from the CARES Act. FEMA, you know, that's one of the things that they cover. And particularly since most of that effort is going to be focused on FEMA grants and FEMA recovery, then I would look to having FEMA be the source of reimbursement.
Yeah, and we've definitely talked about that as that is absolutely preferred. Until we get this figured out of how we want to do it, and make sure that we are able to understand exactly what's covered. I mean, I understand it is, but they're also, so yes, that is their priority, but then it's going to also be the rest of the, and they kind of have to look at all the funding pieces that we have to look at if, just double checking to make sure that whatever we submit for FEMA public assistance reimbursement isn't also submitted under CARES and
Right.
those kind of things. So you're right. The ideal is to submit for FEMA public assistance reimbursement for this financial support. But it's not just the FEMA PA that they'll be working on, if that makes sense. But yes, we
No,
agree
yeah.
with you. That's what we've discussed in our
Yeah.
meeting so far. So I think maybe what you're saying is we might not even need that 50K for that line item at all. We might not need any. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, the other source of funding could come from FEMA. So, but I agree, it's good to reserve and prepare for all contingencies. So,
Yeah, I mean, I suspect we'll need some. I don't think FEMA will pay for us to evaluate CARES actions. And so I suspect we'll need some. And
And
I
we're
don't
still
have a
working
great
on
frame-
getting those. Sorry, George.
Oh, I don't have a great frame of reference for what that could cost. So I agree, like, let's keep a high number there so that we can pay for it.
yeah. And also just as kind of a point of interest, if nothing else, we're currently caught up with the CARES Act reimbursement paperwork. Yesterday I had a long meeting with Mary from DOLA, and we got the next reimbursement form filled out and ready to go. So I think that we're prepared now to just ride out the rest of the balance in CARES Act, and probably one, possibly two more reimbursement requests, and we'll be through that process, and we'll be fully compensated from CARES Act.
Okay. We did have more to talk about. Good. Let me try to recap what I heard. We've got 25,000 on individual support, or up to, probably less than that. If we want to do something other than fund Alyssa and the consumer protection, then we'll come to the board and ask for permission. If we want to add new ideas that are more than $5,000, we'll come to the board. And we're putting up to 50K into that CARES line item. Maybe the last point on that one is that maybe it is acceptable to leave it to staff to decide at the point at which we have clarity about what that will cost to make that line item be accurate.
Sure. Yeah.
We should have those numbers soon. We have a quote from one firm. We met with another firm yesterday and should have that quote by mid next week. So we should be able to nail down that amount, at least preliminary, assuming that the number doesn't go up once they get in and start working on stuff for us.
Okay, I didn't miss anything.
No, I think that sounds pretty good. And I was thinking we only had the one thing that was getting back to the board, but you're right. If there's a major expenditure, to use that part of that 145, 187 for, you were right. I think we said that that would come back to the board. And if it was something that wasn't already on this sheet also, it would, if it fulfilled both of those, then come back to the board. And then new things that are over $5,000 are a pretty good idea. And I'm kind of trying to speak for both Sean and myself when I say that, you know, some kind of a general feel. And I don't know, you know, I would say that in that we have staff working with a commissioner right now on this, that it's often that staff contacts one of the commissioners to ask them their opinion about something like that. So it's, I don't know that it's, you know, and we're also really good about scheduling special meetings if we need to, if there's something that's timely. So, you know, I make a commitment that if I say, yeah, I'd like to see this, I also don't want to hold up the train leaving the station on a good idea.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'm fine with this. This is fine. We're in a different context. I mean, we have 6 months to spend this money. It's probably not as much time as we think. But it's some time. And so, you know, and yeah, anyway, I'll stop talking about that. Thanks for your attention on this. Anything else on CARES, or should we move to the next topic?
I'm fine moving on anytime. And we can do a call. I did reduce it to the next topic on here was that resolution of support. I'd like to explain why. You know, the other day in the meeting, we said we can issue staff direction to simply notify. And then as I kind of like slept on it overnight, Tuesday night, some things occurred to me, and I contacted Peter on Wednesday and let him know the reasons that I thought that a resolution that memorializes the decision, to me, it felt like a pretty important decision when we start, you know, recommending, even though it's not our final decision, the renaming of a major geographic feature in the county. So I thought it was important that we should memorialize our reasons to the public beyond a recording of a meeting somewhere and the discussions that we have in that meeting. Also, I thought it was important that if we did feel that this was a good thing to do, and as Sean said, he was honored, that it was that we didn't just say, yes, we support these things these people want to do to the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board and the Bureau of Geographic Names, but that we told them why. And we told them why it was important, because it was an idea that we, you know, felt strongly enough about to support not only name change, but why that particular name was acceptable. Another thing is that I've had it said to me over and over, and I know I've said it in our previous meetings, so probably everybody on this screen has heard it a few times. What I have heard hanging out with the Cheyenne and Arapaho and going down to Sand Creek and stuff was that these name changes, while it's very important to them to have that one piece, you know, a piece at a time given back from their life and their history, that unless it changes, you know, a society at large that helped them get where they are, it's a lost opportunity, and it didn't serve the real purpose. So in other words, education was important. And the final reason was I thought it gave us a document to hand back to them that said, we heard you, and here's what we heard. And so those were, and the timeliness, the reason for timeliness is that in general, we need to submit to the CGNAB and BGN. And so if we're going to communicate to them in this way, we needed to get it done. And I know we didn't have a full, we need to get that word out to them. And we don't have a full quorum next week either. And then I'm in surgery the week after that. And the longer we wait, this becomes more of an anachronism, because we're just going to have to, you know, send them a note that says, by the way, we support, as opposed to this and then follow this up later. So I thought it was important to go ahead and get it done and out of the way. And it honestly is something that occurred to me after I slept on it overnight, and I just thought it was deserving of a little better memorialization. If you'd like, I can pull it up on screen, do a screen share on it. It's just down to a one-page thing. Is that important enough to anyone to do that, George?
I mean, I think it makes sense to throw it up on the screen while I talk about it.
Okay. And that way we can actually wordsmith a little if we need to.
Um, I'm not motivated to wordsmith any of this. I,
You see it? I'm sorry. It looks like it was
Oh,
on the
no, I
screen
can't.
and now it's off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
this,
Oh, okay, let's try this. Is it now?
Yes.
Yep.
Ah, okay.
Thanks.
So Randy, I agree with the reasons that you have for wanting this resolution. Reflecting on it a little bit myself, I think there's also a transparency piece. You alluded to that. You didn't use that word, but you alluded to it when you said, people should know our reasons without having to go dig through hours of meeting
Right.
video of it. Who knows how long it'll be on Facebook. So I support a resolution. I support this resolution. I have a question just for the room. Anybody? I read through this pretty carefully because I've seen boards of county commissioners pass resolutions that I don't think represent facts. I think we're trying to represent this as statements of fact. These are our findings through this process. Just want to make sure that there's not anybody in this room here who's read this and thinks that there's a word or statement in here that is not factual. And for the record, I do think it's all factual.
If I could just speak to that, just to be safe, in an abundance of caution, I went back and I researched the statements that are in there. I know Randy had already done all that anyway, but I just thought it would be a good thing to be able to answer if asked, in fact. And this is actually completely accurate. I mean, from my perspective, I don't see anything in there that's hyperbole in terms of the accounts of the massacre, Owl Woman, anything of that nature. And as far as the representations concerning the name, as far as it being derogatory, dehumanizing, and so forth, the other aspects, frankly, if you Google that, you're going to see a tremendous amount of literature that essentially just backs that up. Now, is everybody going to say that that's dehumanizing, derogatory, objectifying, and insulting to Native Americans? No, I guarantee you there's some people that probably won't. So to a degree, there's probably some opinion there, but based on your analysis and your findings and your discussion, I think it's completely within your rights to make that finding. It's certainly not untrue based on everything that you've presented and you guys have talked about.
Yeah, I think as an example, in the first line, the way I tried to break this down was that the first line essentially establishes that this mountain is in Clear Creek County. I state that it's the ancestral lands of Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and Native American. It's very difficult because we didn't have surveyors a long time back. But I have looked at maps from 1851 and 61 and spoken, with the tribes and spoken with other historians that know. And I think those are, it is a fact that a number of tribes, even beyond the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute, claim to have connections to this land at different times. And so rather than get too specific, I've seen maps that show the breakdown between the Ute and Arapaho territory, and the Cheyenne at times traveled with the Arapaho and were together. And it is, and there are plenty of accounts that talk about, that show the general boundary line between Arapaho and Ute to be somewhere in Clear Creek County, back and forth, up and down through. And it only makes sense that in the heat of the summer, that all the verbal accounts should be true, that they hunted and lived in this area. So in my mind, there's no doubt about the adjectives that I used in the second. So the next three whereases simply make the case for change. And the next three whereases after that justify what the name is changing to. It is true. Owl Woman's history was important. She was married to William Bent, the father of George Bent. And Bent's Fort was a place where multiple tribes and the white travelers passing through and white settlers in the area did trade and were able to get along peacefully through the 30s and 40s. She died in a cholera epidemic around 47. And there was a Treaty of 51 that ceded a big deal of land, and there are maps that show those territories to the Arapaho and the Cheyenne and the Ute. And gold was discovered in 59, so there was a new treaty in 61. And by 1964 is when, 1864, excuse me, was when Governor Evans issued the proclamation that hostile Indians could be killed where they stood, where you saw them. And then got into to prove they weren't hostile, they'd have to be in certain places and carrying certain symbols. And then those people were attacked anyway. So the reason I mentioned the Sand Creek Massacre as a justification for her was because she immediately preceded that period, and the different entities were able to work together peacefully. And so she serves as that example, and that's a reason why they chose her as an example of a different way of doing business. And I do say down in that last whereas that we vow to remember that history in order never to repeat it. It occurred to me I should say we will remember the history in order not to repeat it. I can't guarantee what future humans will do, but I'm okay with the wording the way it is too, if we wish to say it that strongly.
I was looking at that word too. I mean, and I don't want to over wordsmith here, but the but could be an and.
Yeah, I had an and there. And the reason I changed it to but was because I didn't want to imply that by relegating the word and its inhumane idea to history that we just put it in a drawer somewhere and forgot about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
So I use that as a kind of a staccato point, if you will, to cause you to stop and think that we didn't just slip it into that history drawer. Because, and part of it's because a lot of people say when we change these names, we lose the history. And so then we won't remember what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm happy to change it to an and if you feel it flows better.
I just don't know that, like, the way I view the word but is it negates the previous statement. But that's like that's not going to affect my vote on this. So
it reads a little more melodically now. I think you're right.
So then, and I want to go to the top whereas, and this is, I promise is the last thing, which means I'm going to break that promise. The hereinafter referred to as Mestaje Mountain. Is that getting ahead of ourselves a little bit? Because I mean, we're not changing a name.
No, I'm speaking to hereinafter within this document in order to not use the previous word again. And actually, and the only place we mention it is down in the last paragraph. Now, therefore, be it resolved. No, yeah. We actually mention it in her name as well.
Right, and so I think we could take that out and avoid that perception and not change the meaning of this.
Yeah, I'm willing to do that. I put that in there to say we're not going to call it that.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I read it.
In this document, I don't feel like typing that again.
That's right, and fortunately, in the rest of the document, you do not refer to S Mountain until I think further down where you actually say it should be renamed.
And actually, it's in the last paragraph, and I use the claw again anyway to redefine the name. So that's fine. That's removed.
Okay. Yeah, you do kind of have to, I think, put it there. So, okay. Other than that, I'm good. And so
do you like what you see now? I hope I didn't leave any extra commas or spaces in there. I think we've got it.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, it's frank language. I don't think it's hyperbole in the slightest. The fact is, we've got some poignant moments in our history and some actions that need to be addressed for us to move forward, and we might as well address those in a way that's as accurate and direct as if we were talking about what we ate for lunch yesterday.
Tried to just state it as it was.
Yep. So yeah, I don't have any other comments on this. I welcome comments from staff.
Any comments from anybody?
The only thing I would mention is that we're going to take this resolution, presuming it passes, and with Randy's assistance, we'll put together a letter and send it to the appropriate parties. And then I believe Randy's going to take the lead and reach out to many of the Native American nations that he's actually been speaking to make them aware of it as well. And, you know, my thought is that other counties in Colorado may consider copying something like this. Obviously not this particular wording because we're dealing with one mountain here, but the way that Randy and the commission have really led this to take an active role in it is I think not typical of every county, and it's very nice to see. And I told Randy that yesterday.
Great.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm looking forward to sending this to a few folks down south and up north. I was kind of hoping for that letter size. That's why I reworked it into letter size so we could put it into a frameable version easily. So 1 page. In which case, I move that we approve Resolution 21R21-50, resolution in support of Northern Cheyenne Tribal proposal to rename Squaw Mountain to be Mistahe Mountain.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
And I just want to make sure that we reflect that it's with the amendments that Randy's made and not what was in the backup to the agenda item. The slight changes is what you're referring to.
Right. Correct. Do we need to vote again?
No, I think the record's clear.
Right. Yeah, this is, it's on screen right now in a recording, so you can see what we passed. And then, so the sooner you can forge our names to this and send a finalized attested version, would appreciate. Beth, thank you.
And just so you know, since Commissioner Wood could not be present, that line will be blank. It will not indicate absence or anything. It'll just have Commissioner Marlin and Commissioner Wheelock's names on there. The line for Sean Wood will be blank.
And since it's only 1 page, does it need to say page 1 and all that stuff on the bottom?
You can absolutely take that out.
Good enough.
Okay, and Beth, you have my permission to sign.
And actually, I'll just drive up and sign.
Randy, can you email me this final version that you just edited so I can print that one?
Right away.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for your time on a Friday afternoon, everybody. Any final words?
Yep.
We are adjourned.